So now at this point, then, who's number 4? We got Dallas Turner here on the board. But what do you guys think about that? Who do you guys think we're weighing that against?
I think honestly, for me, it's a tad rich for Dallas Turner. I know the Bears need an edge in like kind of the worst way if you're looking at just positional needs outside of quarterback. I like Dallas Turner. Don't get me wrong. He's probably going to end up being my top edge once I factor in the testing and whatnot. But like he's definitely not like a blue chip prospect. I wouldn't consider him a top 5 prospect in most draft classes. I know some of this is given what the Bears need, but I think there's just like a little bit missing on his tape for me to consider him here. Like a guy like Jerzon Newton, who's right under there, I think checks all the boxes. His tape's dominant. He's been productive throughout his career. I think once he does do the athletic testing, he's going to crush it. I don't think that like if you're going to weigh those two as prospects, I think Newton's like a far better prospect and someone I'd way heavily consider in the top 5 than I would a Dallas Turner.
Big thing for me as I watched through the DTs, I came out feeling like both DTs, so that's Jerzon Newton and Byron Murphy, who's a little further down the board, were better plug-and-play pass rushers than any of the edges. With Turner, you've got the size profile. Heck yes. You got the frame. Heck yes. You have the pedigree. Heck yes. You've got the age. Heck yes. You've got the athletic testing. Heck yes. But is he plug and play right now? Not quite. You are still factoring in a little bit of growth as a pass rusher that I think Byron Murphy tomorrow could pressure the passer at an NFL level. I think Johnny Newton has shown you everything you could want to see. My only concern with Johnny is that everything was amazing up until he had a Jones fracture. And in talking to Mason West from Windy City Gridiron, who's also a physical therapist in his real life scenario, he mentioned that Jones fractures can be a bugaboo for heavier guys because that's a planting foot that can become a major, well, you can lose a step. And the moment that somebody like Newton, who I don't know if he really had a step, and if he did, he had one, can lose a step and not suffer about a round's worth of production. Still good player, but maybe not that blue chipper. So medicals are something that obviously none of us have access to.
I think you made a great point though about Byron Murphy coming in and being pro ready. I think that there's like missing elements of like, and I think you brought that up with Dallas Turner. I think there's missing elements of that in terms of like projection upside. He's as good as anybody in this class. Like, I think he has of all the edges, the most like well-rounded tool set of athletic traits. But if you're going to be a top 10 pick, in my opinion, or a top 10 player, you have to check all of the boxes. And I think there's some that are missing on Turner's, even though I really like him. And I wouldn't mind if the Bears took him at 9. I just think in this class, which is a loaded class, I think there's some candidates I'd put above Turner.
We're talking about a former linebackers coach who, like, he goes to bed at night and he wakes up sweaty thinking about 3 techniques. And so to me, it's got to be one of those two. Like, if you think it's Johnny Newton, defer. I tend to think he would be looking at Byron Murphy. I mean, it doesn't just take the Hogan Johns podcast that we just heard where Josh Lucas has Byron Murphy at number 3, because that's not what this project is. We're doing our own grades. It's more that when we talked about this at the Senior Bowl, Q and Steven. I know I'm watching as much how a player moves as well as how they play football, and Byron moves very differently from most 300-pound human beings, which is always going to get my eye. But if you ask me, even if all of these players were there, I think either Murphy or Newton is the guy. What do you guys think?
I think I have to go into this saying with Johnny Newton, I'm believing that where I want to rank him is based on his medicals checking out clear. Now, I know you'll get some pushback on that.
I think that's a fair assumption.
I've talked about Latu in a different light, but I just think a neck injury is a whole different thing than a foot injury. And I put them in different aspects, different vision. But I see Newton and I get PTSD over the Bears missing out on Aaron Donald by 1 pick because of how good his hands are. Now, his first step, it's not Aaron Donald. I don't want to be sitting here saying he's going to be the next Aaron Donald. But man, you find an interior guy who can get after the passer with that type of hand fighting technique, you have something different. I mean, we saw last year, Kalijah Cansey had very similar hand technique at a much lighter weight. And Kalijah Cansey was trouble in the league last year. Like, I'm not sure there are many interior offensive lines that can truly block Jerzon Newton. And when I watch Byron Murphy, and I like Byron Murphy a lot, but I see a guy who has a lot of learning to do still. I see a guy who is going to get trap blocked constantly in the NFL because he wants to shoot that gap, and that's his go-to thing. That's what he wins with. It's all he really wins with right now, and that makes his floor to me like a Sheldon Rankins, right? A guy who can just constantly shoot the gap, never really learned a whole lot more. Whereas with Johnny Newton, I'm seeing a really high floor. It's just that foot injury. That's the only thing that knocks him down at all for me.
All right, yeah, I had Newton over Murphy, but it was close, and it basically for all the same things you were saying. It's just the hand technique and the hand fighting. I don't know what his foot's like. And Robert, you bring up a very good point about what Mason said and everything like that, but I just don't know that information. I don't know what they have. So to me, I thought that Newton was a little bit better than Murphy, but kind of going back, I don't want to like backtrack a little bit, but if we're talking like what the Bears board and what they're looking at. And I know it's smokescreen season, but they told us they were looking at edge, wide receiver, and offensive tackle. So on the Bears board, I know you're right. Eberflus wants that 3 technique. He does, but that's not what they said. So I don't know. I don't know if they wouldn't have Dallas Turner over Newton and Murphy.
If we're talking defensive prospects and we're going to stay in the 3 tech, I think I agree with everything you guys said. I think Newton is probably the more pro ready in terms of a pass rusher. I do think Murphy's a bit better of a run defender at like holding the line of scrimmage and whatnot, even though I don't think he's like amazing at that. I just think he showed to be a lot better than Newton in that regard. I think the Bears would lean probably towards Newton because they're so traits driven. They love traits. And I think I think Murphy's pop off the screen a lot more than maybe Newton's. Newton's more of like a smooth, technical pass rusher, where Murphy is like kind of like a bull in a china shop, just like explodes up the field. I think that's more of the Bears' preference.
Newton's the football player. Murphy's the athlete that might be an even better football player.
Yes.
And that's where Poles is going to gravitate to, is the athlete, I believe.
The other thing to everything we're talking about, because Tom, the other piece to this, and we'll get to 9 when we get to 9, dadgummit, but I can't help wondering if Poles and Eberflus are going into this draft thinking we have to come out of this whole process with a completed team. There's no room here to come out of this without 2 pass rushers at least on your defensive line, because you can't win in the modern NFL without at least 2 guys. And you can't be so thin that if Montez Sweat goes down, you have no plan, which sucks because I'm right there with you. Roma Dunze might be BPA when everything's said and done at number 9, and the Bears may trade off of BPA, but they've put themselves in a position after free agency where they don't really have another option to getting better at defensive line. They don't have a 2nd round pick where guys like Darius Robinson could become somebody in play here. So you almost look at this and it's like, well, if you trade down, you'll have a shot at a pretty doggone good receiver in the middle of the 2nd. We'll get there when we get there, but I don't know. That's all. It's all theory until you actually do it, especially if the Bears are in position to get sniped for wide receiver at 8. If Atlanta trades off and lets somebody else come up and jump the Bears. But Q, you're the GM here. Make a decision.
I think I am a little blinded by the tape on Johnny Newton because I just love his tape so much that a lot of more reasonable voices I'm hearing are saying Byron Murphy, and the last week I've spent trying to figure out how much of that is just 3 weeks away from the draft hype. A guy always jumps up aboard versus how much of it is merited. And I might've been a little off in my assessment there. So I'm leaning towards saying Byron Murphy here, even though Johnny Newton is one of my blue chip players in my grades and Byron Murphy is a red chip to me.
Don't let group think ruin your work. If you think Johnny Newton's better, put Johnny Newton.
Literally, I think he is better. I'd back you, Q, if you want to go Newton.
I was just going to say, Robert, that was perfect, because I think the 3 of us, Robert, I don't know where your rankings are, but I think the 3 of us all have Newton over him. So if that's the case, I think
to tell you exactly where I'm at, and I'm no perfect voice, I think Byron has everything that the NFL likes to see. If you're looking for a football player, Newton's a better guy. flat out. If you're looking for somebody who you could project to be the next Aaron Donald, I think Murphy gives you a better shot at that with a bigger chance of getting somebody who is Sheldon Rankins, exactly like you mentioned. I also think when you look at the Dane Bruglers and the Mel Kuypers and the Field Yateses, these guys do have more access to medicals than we realize. And I would imagine the NFL is a little more wary of the Jones fracture than maybe we are. But screw it. You made the assumption that the medical's checked out. That's an assumption you are allowed to make, Q, because you don't have the information. Why believe what you think you're hearing when it could all be smokescreen anyways, and everybody could be boxing each other out to try to go get Johnny Newton? List him. Take a stance.
All right. Well, you guys got me. 6 is Johnny Newton. And then 7. Now, this is where, do we think Byron Murphy falls at 7 there right after him? Or do we think Dallas Turner is worth consideration there?
I would put Dallas Turner over Newton, not on my personal board, but on the Bears' big board. I think that's where they would go. I think they want that outside pressure. I mean, I know it's smokescreen season, but man, they haven't really had many smokescreens this year. They've made their intentions pretty apparent all off season. I think they're looking for edge pressure over interior pressure. I think they like Gervon Dexter. I think they like Zach Pickens, who they drafted last year. And whether they should or not, we don't know. But I think they're more likely to draft an edge than a D tackle. Even if it's not what I would do, even if it's a lower player on my board, I think that's what the Bears would do.
I think it's also important to mention they have shown interest in 2 defensive tackles who can fit that 3-tech and 1-tech versatility later in the draft in Dwayne Carter and Mason Smith. They have spoken to both those guys, which makes me wonder, are they thinking, we're looking for a backup 1-tech who can kick to the 3-tech when the offense shifts? Not necessarily we're looking for the 3-tech unless it's just that guy.
And that's the thing, right? Newton and Murphy would be, you can't pass this guy. I think they have designs for Gervon Dexter to take a step into the spotlight here. And that would be bro, I don't know what to tell you. We got the chance to draft Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton.
That's how I see it. I'm thinking, like, you just took developmental guys last year. Like, if you're gonna attack the position again, why not go for the clear? Like for as exciting Gervon Dexter showed to be towards the end of last year, I don't think he's done anything in his NFL career thus far that would tell you that he was a better prospect or has shown enough in the NFL to pass on a Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton. Like, I think they're that good of prospects where, like, I want Gervon Dexter to succeed, but I'm not counting on them being better. But I hear Steve's argument that the edge, I think, is a bigger need in the eyes of the Bears.
I'm with you. My main thing when I look at Turner is if we're already making the argument, and I think it's a smart one, that the Bears do ultimately care maybe more about traits than they do about production, then the long arm Dallas Turner that would be a near perfect 4-3 weak side edge, not the strong side, but the weak side edge, where he's light, he's quick, speed driven, still has power in his hands, but he's also got a ridiculous length profile given that he's not that big of a person. This could easily get Matt Eberflus's attention. And if you want to put him at 7, I'm going to be the scout in the room that's just going to let you do it without thinking that this is one of my hills to die on. Does that make sense?
Ultimately, I think why I land on Dallas Turner at 7 here is the fact that he walked into Alabama as a true freshman and played true rotational snaps and then became the starter every year thereafter that. Like he played something like 400 snaps as a true freshman on Alabama's defensive line, which tells me that the kid works. You don't play for Saban unless you work. And I think that's something that the Bears will value pretty highly. And I think it still fits our Johnny Newton at 6. I think they're going to love the fact that Johnny Newton led the FBS in regular season snaps last year on a broken foot. That type of stuff I think really resonates with them. So I'm thinking Dallas Turner at 7 here is the way to go.
Let's do it.
And then I think we can just throw Murphy at 9. At 8 then, right?
Yeah, I agree. Murphy, just kick him in at 8 there.